Okay, good morning guys. Final session of the week. Final session before the latest last-ditch attempt to save Greece. So it's all coming to a head, of course, and interesting movements this morning, and actually technically phenomenally important, actually, because if you look at the DAX chart here, then really ever since the referendum weekend, ever since the weekend that Tsipras announced he was going to have a referendum, so he announced that on the weekend of the 27th and 28th of June, the DAX gapped lower. Now ever since then, the following week we traded sideways, then the referendum announcement came and it was a no, and we gapped lower again, and then we traded sideways to lower last week, and now of course this week we are pushing back higher. Really positive session yesterday, getting us up above briefly 11,000 and back above the previous week's high. And check out what's gone on this morning, another gap higher, but look at the top, it's bang on this high from the 29th of June, so retesting the highest point traded since Tsipras announced that they were going to have a referendum. So the price at 11,293, very important. Look at the Eurostoxx chart, exactly the same technically. This morning, we're up 2.5% here on Eurostoxx and just about testing the equivalent level. So again, testing the highest level traded since Tsipras announced we were going to have a referendum. If we just looked on like a daily chart, then this kind of, actually let me just adjust a couple of these lines. Obviously a powerful move and gap higher overnight, and this is of course as a result of the developments. Greece Finally and just about in time delivered their proposal. This is what is believed to be at least the final effort, the final proposal from Greece to try and get a deal done this weekend. So this is how it's going to pan out. So the proposal has been delivered just before midnight last night, which was the deadline. They are now in Greek Parliament as I speak. There's a vote happening. Now, this is a vote to give the green light to the Tsipras government to negotiate this new proposal that's on the table. Okay, so the vote in the Parliament is just to allow Tsipras to negotiate over the next 2 days. Okay, now it's quite clever. This isn't a vote in Greek Parliament for the proposal, it's a vote to negotiate it. So it's probably going to be a yes, even though there was an emergency. Some of the extreme factions of the Syriza party had an emergency meeting this morning to discuss this new latest proposal, and there was a little bit of anger that Tsipras has crossed the line in some of the details. So what's in the proposal? Is it likely to end up in what we want, which is a deal? So the proposal has made further concessions. So it's apparently Greece is seeking a 53.5 billion euro new bailout over a 3-year period using the ESM funds, that's the Eurozone Emergency Bailout Fund. Now this is firstly lower than previous kind of numbers that were being thrown around, that Greece may well need as much as 80 billion, so apparently they're seeking 53.5 billion. The proposal includes VAT reform as of July, i.e. right now, and they're willing to agree to a primary budget surplus target of 1% of GDP in 2015, 2% of GDP in 2016. They're also proposing to raise corporation tax from 26% to 28%, and they're also willing to make further moves on pension savings that could total 0.25 to 0.05% of savings. That's 0.25 to 0.05 of GDP. of savings next year. Okay, so there are some definite positives in this proposal. There's definitely more concessions. I mean, the ironic thing is that actually the proposal that Tsipras has just delivered is a worse proposal from Greece's point of view, is a worse proposal than the nation voted no to in the referendum last weekend. So, but such is politics. I think Tsipras, we'll see. I was going to say maybe he's played this one quite well. He would have played it spectacularly badly if they default. But he might have played this quite well in really deceiving the Greek people in a way, making them vote no for a proposal, then delivering one that's worse, but actually spinning it in a way that the Greek people believe they've got a victory. So it could be genius, but it equally could be amateurish and lead to the Greek car smashing into the wall of default. So obviously time will tell, and when I say time, I mean the next 48 hours. So all to play for. There's probably just enough, as you can see in markets this morning, there's just enough in this proposal to lead to a little bit of hope. This is what you've got in markets this morning, a little bit of optimism and hope that maybe right at the death we can get a deal, Greece will avoid defaulting, and we have some sort of bailout arrangement. Greece get funded, they make their payment to the ECB, the 3.5 billion that they owe, they pay the IMF, so they're not in arrears anymore. As importantly, the ECB continue to fund the Greek banks so that they don't collapse, etc., etc. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. We've got a Greek vote in Parliament now, any time this morning. It's expected to be yes. The proposal is now with the institutions, and they are analysing it and reviewing it, and will be delivering their recommendations to the finance ministers. So the Eurozone finance ministers meet tomorrow on Saturday. They will then try to agree a deal which will then be agreed upon and signed off on Sunday when the whole of the EU leaders get together for this emergency summit. So this summit on Sunday is either going to be to sign off the deal, or is going to be to finalise sort of crisis arrangements to deal with the fallout of a Greek exit, or not a Greek exit, a Greek default with potentially a Greek exit. Okay, so Sunday could not be more important. It will go down in history, Greek history at least, and we'll see. There's just about enough in the proposal to give markets some hope. So this morning the DAX up sharply, but not above that key top. That's such an important technical level. We tested it this morning, and that's just capped the upside for now. So we'll see how we pan out. Technically, I think, I don't think we're going to stay in this range long. The range for the day that's already been set, I think it's quite a wide range, actually, just looking at it. If I just add another line in here, if we get a break either way, it should set up a decent extension. A break above the high of the day should lead to a filling of the gap and a moving up to 11,350. That's the gap back to the 25th of June low. But equally then a break of today's low would lead to perhaps, it's a big distance actually, but the market working its way down through the gap from last night or yesterday's high and today's low. Okay, so technically it's very important here. Initially optimism. Check out what's going on with the Bund. Here's my Bund chart, bottom middle. If I make that a little bigger, then as you can see, we opened lower and pretty sharply moving lower down. Technically this is quite clear as well. We've got a key level around about the 152 handle. This was the high of the day on the 3rd of July. It was the low of the day on the 6th of July. That's of course been broken here, adding to a 70 tick and more moves to the downside. So you've got core Europe yields pushing higher, and you've got peripheral Europe yields moving lower. So this is spread tightening, and you've got risk on with European stocks again having a second day of gains, because don't forget yesterday was a pretty punchy up day in its own right. Well over 2% higher for all European indices. The FTSE MIB up 3.5%, for example. Now also China's in the mix here, because finally China's had 2 up days in a row, and in fact they've had their 2 biggest up days since 2008. The Shanghai Composite, 5% yesterday, looks like 5% today. So for now, and I do say for now, the Chinese government, with their just ridiculous efforts, have managed to halt the collapse. But whether this is what we call a dead cat bounce or not, we will see. Certainly they are not in the clear by any means, but certainly China's helping here with a couple of punchy up days on the rebound, and that's helped to kind of settle some of these global nerves, and with the new Greek proposal at least going a decent distance to close the gap, the difference between them and the creditors. So optimism in the air. Okay, how long this lasts we'll see, because of course we're inevitably going to get a flurry of Greek related headlines throughout the session, and people. So we've already had one from a German CDU lawmaker, Futsch, or maybe that's pronounced wrong, but anyway, he says that he has a slight issue with placing faith in the Greek proposal. He has a slight issue. What Greece are trying to do, they need to rebuild trust, and so apparently this new proposal does say they're going to get on with reforms immediately, i.e. next week. The only thing that's not in the proposal that I'm a little bit worried about is the fact there's not really much by way of things like labour market reform. That very vague on any labour market reforms. This is kind of a reform that's absolutely essential if Greece are ever going to be able to pay back their debt, and this is what Europe are worried about. If the proposal means that ultimately their economy is not going to evolve and become more competitive, well then, forget about paying back debt. You can push it, you can restructure it to 30 years down the line, and they're not going to pay it back. So there are these proposals, as I've said, just about enough to have some optimism, but by no means is this proposal absolutely nailed on, going to be agreed upon by the European creditors. There's a lot of work that's going to happen in the next 48 hours, and it's definitely still in the balance, but the risk of a default has dropped. How much, I'm not sure, because we don't really have the full details here, and we haven't really had many comments yet about this. It's too early for any of these kind of key people to be making comments on the content of this proposal. So you're going to get headlines through the day. This will shape the session. France's EU Affairs Minister has just said that the newly submitted proposals from Greece are credible and serious. Now what you've got to understand here is, on the creditors' side of the fence, there's a split. France are heading up the faction that is desperately trying to get a deal done. In fact, France had sent people to Greece this week to help them compile this latest proposal that's just been delivered. So France are in the pro-deal camp. So when you get comments from France's EU Affairs Minister saying that the proposal is credible and serious, you got to understand that France are in the positive camp. You're going to get Germany in the negative camp. Okay, so you've got to take these comments in context and understand which side of the fence they're coming from. So there we are. Look at the euro. So equities up, bonds down. Well, core safe haven debt down, peripheral bonds bid. Look at the euro. So the euro's taken a move up, and we're just kind of testing this kind of key level that we've had this month, really. I'm just going to move that line slightly. So coming off the high of the 2nd of July, which was pretty much the high of the 3rd of the July, which pretty much defined the top yesterday. We're still testing it this morning. It's got a little bit messy though. We have moved up above this price point by, well, what is it, about 15 pips or so, but none of these candles, of course, have managed to close above that price. So again, a little bit of a sign that momentum is lost around this key price point. But of course, in the grand scheme of things, if we go to the daily chart, the euro's middle of the last middle of the range of the last few months. So it is, pretty remarkable that it's managed to kind of stay up here in the first place. Now, we did have some Fed comments yesterday, which may be helping here in preventing the downside, although we did get kind of contradictory comments. Let me just report on this. So Fed's George, for example, she said that she is still expecting, let me see, so she has, this is the Kansas City Fed chief. She's reiterated her view that the Fed should raise rates sooner rather than later. Keeping rates near zero is risky in my view. However, Fed's Evans then, perhaps, so that was that's a slightly hawkish comment from George, but it's not but then Fed's Evans made a dovish comment that was more extreme than George's hawkish comment, if that makes sense. Evans said, I still have the first funds rate increase not taking place till 2016. Now that's something he said quite a lot, but something he said that I don't believe he said before, is that he said, before then clarifying that would be, so he thinks rate hike in 2016, and he said that would be more like sometime around the middle of next year. So Evans is saying not only 2016 hike, but wait till the summer of 2016. So that's pretty dovish. So perhaps that's helping to just keep the dollar on the back foot and preventing this euro dollar from sliding. But anyway, we've got a little bit of positivity on the Greek risk this morning. In terms of the S&P, well, it's been a pretty balanced month, really. At least the last week or this week. I say balanced. We've got a huge range on the go here, but it's pretty stable. We keep pinging from one side to the other. I mean, check out these lows down around in the sort of mid 2030s. So the 5th of July low, the 7th of July low, the 8th of July low, the 9th of July low, all around this territory, and yet we keep rebounding sharply off this. So big move to the downside last night, has now been fully recovered, and we're almost up to test yesterday's high. So it's pretty remarkable the ranges this index is playing out seemingly on a daily basis, and not only on a daily basis. If you take Tuesday, for example, we covered the range pretty much 3 times almost. Yesterday we covered the range twice, up to the top and all the way back to the bottom. So it's pretty directionless, and here we are back up at the top side of the range. So technically things are quite important, I think, especially with those European equity indices testing those high points from the 29th of June after that initial fallout when Tsipras announced there's going to be a referendum. Okay, so that's the update, and actually right there, that's the update on the 3 big issues ahead of us: Greece, China, and the Fed. Okay, key updates on kind of all 3, and with a Greek proposal, a Chinese equity market rebound, and a dovish Fed's Evans, that's a kind of positive developments on all 3 from a kind of risk appetite point of view. So that's what's helped to just lead to the positive gains at the open today. All right, let's have a quick look at the calendar. I'm just going to give me a sec. Data yesterday, well, not too much, but we did get jobless claims came in worse than expected. In fact, the highest reading for 4 months, but probably disrupted by the Independence Day bank holiday. So really we've got to wait till next week to see if that was valid. So here we go. Here's the calendar for the rest of the session. In terms of data that we've already had, we're getting manufacturing production data and industrial production data from the likes of France and Holland and Italy this morning. We've already had a few of these. So the French industrial production data, for example, came in line with expected on the month, plus 0.4%. Their manufacturing production slightly better, plus 0.6 above the plus 0.4 expected. Holland, their manufacturing production was 2%. That's on an annualized basis. Industrial sales, though, minus 3.7%, again on an annualized basis. So not too much dramatic in terms of important data, and that's really the case through the morning. We've got some trade balance data from the UK at 9:30. And then in the US, unfortunately, the data's not important at all. So in terms of economic data today, pretty uninteresting, and certainly uninteresting when you compare it to the significance of the likely Greek comments that are going to be flying around as this new proposal has been delivered. So that's what's going to shape the session, of course. We do have Yellen speaking as well. So this is a really important speech. Unfortunately, it's not until 5:30 after the European close, but she's talking on the economic outlook, and so that's definitely important in terms of thinking about Fed rate expectations and what's she going to say about Greece. Unfortunately, it perhaps would have been better if this speech was on Monday after the weekend. When we get, well, hopefully, I presume we get a final result on Greece, whether there's a deal or not. It's got to be a binary outcome, surely. They can't string this out any longer. All right, so not much data. Keep your ear to the ground on anything Greek-related. Let's see how we pan out. Just keep in mind these technical situations, especially on European stocks. Okay, that's it for now, guys. Enjoy the day.